When Ethan Miller, a struggling single father working double shifts at a small diner, donates his last $20 to help fund his daughter's school party, he expects nothing in return. But a twist of fate brings his act of kindness to the attention of Michael Anderson, a wealthy CEO whose life is far removed from Ethan's world. Touched by Ethan's sacrifice, Michael decides to throw a surprise celebration, not just for Ethan, but for the entire community. As the two men's lives intertwine, both discover unexpected lessons about dignity, gratitude, and what it truly means to be rich. Ethan Miller stared at the crumpled $20 bill in his hand. It was all he had left until payday, and payday was still 4 days away. The fridge at home held only a carton of milk and half a loaf of bread, but his daughter, Lily, had come home from school talking excitedly about the upcoming class party. The PTA was asking parents for small donations to help make it special. He didn't want Lily to be the only child whose family couldn't contribute. That night, as the diner's neon sign flickered outside the window, Ethan finished wiping down the last table. The tips had been meager, just enough to keep gas in his car. He took out the bill again, feeling its rough edges between his fingers. He knew what logic said keep it, buy groceries, but his heart kept circling back to Lily's bright smile. The next morning, he walked into the school's front office, the 20 folded neatly inside an envelope. He didn't want attention, so he slid it across the desk to Mrs. Carter, the secretary. "For the party," he murmured. She looked up, surprised, but he just nodded and left. Outside, the winter air bit at his cheeks as he headed to work, his mind uneasy, yet oddly at peace. That evening, Lily chattered about cupcake flavors and decorations as they sat at the kitchen table with grilled cheese sandwiches. Ethan watched. Her eyes light up, and for a moment, the worries about money faded. He didn't know it yet, but his small act of sacrifice had set in motion a chain of events that would change everything. The next day, word quietly spread through the school staff about Ethan's donation. Mrs. Carter mentioned it to Ms. Rodriguez, Lily's teacher, while they stood in the hallway before classes began. Neither knew much about Ethan beyond the fact that he was always polite and picked Lily up on time. The idea that a struggling father had given his last bit of money struck them both deeply. In the teacher's lounge, conversations turned from routine lesson plans to this simple act of generosity. "It's not about the amount," Ms. Rodriguez said. "It's about the fact that he gave when he clearly didn't have much to give." The sentiment lingered in the air, softening the usual morning rush. Lily, unaware of the quiet admiration her father had earned, sat at her desk drawing colorful balloons on a scrap of paper. She imagined the party her friends had been talking about and hoped her dad would smile when he saw how much fun she was having. That afternoon, Ms. Rodriguez called a friend she knew in a local community outreach program. She didn't plan anything yet, just felt that maybe, somehow, Ethan's kindness deserved to be noticed. That evening, Ethan served coffee to a man in a tailored suit at the diner's corner booth. The man was a regular, though Ethan didn't know his name. Always ordered black coffee and a chicken sandwich, always tipped well, but never chatted much. Tonight, though, he seemed distracted, scrolling his phone while glancing occasionally out the window. "Long day?" Ethan asked as he refilled the cup. The man looked up, half smiled. "You could say that." They shared a brief exchange about the cold weather before Ethan moved on to the next table. What Ethan didn't notice was that Miss Rodriguez had just emailed this very man a short, heartfelt story about a father who gave his last $20 to his daughter's school party fund. The man was Michael Anderson, CEO of a regional tech company, and also a school benefactor through an anonymous scholarship program. By the time Michael finished his coffee, the story had been read twice, and a small seed of curiosity was planted in his mind. He wondered if the man in the worn apron and tired eyes could be the father in the email. The following morning, Michael stopped by the school before heading to the office. He had a quick chat with Ms. Rodriguez, subtly asking about the donation. When she confirmed the father's name, Ethan Miller Michael's suspicion grew stronger. Driving to work, Michael thought about his own childhood. He'd grown up in a modest home, his father working long hours in a hardware store. The sacrifices his parents made had shaped him, though he'd never really expressed gratitude in any public way. Ethan's gesture felt personal to him, a reminder of where he came from. At his office, Michael asked his assistant to quietly look into Ethan's situation, not to invade privacy, but to understand how to help without embarrassing him. The report came back that afternoon. Single father, part-time gyno job, struggling to make ends meet. Michael sat back in his chair, the city skyline stretching behind him. If there was ever a time to act, it was now. Meanwhile, Ethan sat with Lily at their small kitchen table, helping her cut colored paper for decorations. The heater rattled faintly in the corner, fighting the chill that seeped through the old windows. Lily's laughter filled the room, a bright contrast to the dark worries in Ethan's mind about overdue bills. When Lily went to bed, Ethan lingered in the kitchen, sipping lukewarm tea. He replayed the decision to give away that $20. It didn't make sense on paper, but it felt right in his heart. Still, he couldn't shake the weight of wondering how he'd manage until payday. On the counter sat a small envelope with a past-due notice from the electric company. He flipped it over, unwilling to open it tonight. One thing at a time, he told himself. Across town, Michael was finalizing plans for a different kind of surprise, one that would reach far beyond Ethan's kitchen. The next afternoon, the school called Ethan at work. Mrs. Carter said the PTA wanted to thank him in person and asked if he could stop by after his shift. Ethan felt a mix of pride and discomfort. He didn't donate to be noticed. When he arrived, he found not just Mrs. Carter and Ms. Rodriguez, but also Michael Anderson, standing near the office door. Michael extended a hand, his smile warm. "Ethan, I've heard a lot about you." Ethan shook his hand cautiously, unsure why a man in a suit was here for him. Michael thanked him for his kindness and said he wanted to talk more over coffee at Ethan's convenience. Driving home, Ethan felt puzzled. He didn't know what this was about, but something told him life was shifting in ways he couldn't yet see. They met at a quiet cafe the next morning. Michael asked about Ethan's work, his daughter, and his life in general. At first, Ethan kept his answers short. He wasn't used to opening up to strangers, especially wealthy ones. But Michael's genuine curiosity broke through Ethan's guard. He listened without judgment as Ethan spoke about juggling shifts, raising Lily alone, and trying to keep hope alive. Michael shared a little about his own humble beginnings, the long road to success, and the people who had believed in him along the way. By the end of their conversation, Michael didn't offer money, just a handshake and the promise, "I'll see you soon." Ethan left feeling strangely lighter, though no concrete change had been made. In Michael's mind, however, the blueprint of something much bigger was already forming. Back at his office, Michael called his event planner. He explained he wanted to host a community celebration, but the guest of honor would be Ethan Miller. It had to be a surprise, done in a way that wouldn't embarrass him, but instead uplift him. The planner suggested using the school gym as the venue, tying it to the original class party so Ethan wouldn't suspect anything. Michael agreed and set the budget without hesitation. Over the next few days, invitations went out to parents, local business owners, and community members. The cover story was that it was a community appreciation night with a special acknowledgement, planned for someone whose quiet generosity had inspired others. Meanwhile, Ethan kept working his shifts, unaware of the gathering storm of kindness building around him. At school, Lily heard whispers about a bigger event connected to the class party. She came home brimming with excitement, telling her dad that everyone's going to be there and that it was going to be huge. Ethan smiled, glad she was looking forward to it, but assumed it was just the PTA going overboard. He spent the next evening fixing the loose leg on their kitchen chair, humming to himself while Lily worked on homework. Life felt ordinary, if a bit lean. Across town, volunteers were hanging lights in the gym, setting up long tables covered with bright tablecloths, and arranging food trays that most families in the neighborhood couldn't have afforded on their own. Michael supervised quietly, making sure every detail was perfect. In just one more day, Ethan's life would tilt into a new chapter. The night of the event, Ethan arrived with Lily, expecting a simple school party. But as soon as they stepped into the gym, he froze. The place was transformed streamers, twinkling lights, a live band, and rows of food that looked like it belonged at a wedding. Parents greeted him warmly, and children ran past in a blur of laughter. Michael appeared from the crowd, taking the microphone. "Tonight," he began, "we're here to celebrate someone whose generosity reminds us that kindness is the true wealth." He looked directly at Ethan. Ethan's face flushed as Michael told the story of the $20 donation, not in a way that pitied him, but in a way that honored him. Applause filled the room, and Lily clung to her father's arm, beaming with pride. Ethan realized, standing there in the glow of the lights, that sometimes giving away your last dollar can open doors you never knew existed. After the applause died down, Michael led Ethan and Lily to a table near the front. The food was abundant roast chicken, pasta, fresh bread, desserts in every color. Ethan hesitated before serving himself, feeling like an outsider at his own party. Michael leaned closer. "This is for you as much as it is for everyone here. Please enjoy it." Something in his tone made it clear this wasn't charity. It was gratitude. As they ate, neighbors stopped by to thank Ethan for what he'd done, telling him it had inspired them to give more too. For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt not like a man barely holding on, but like someone who mattered. Lily laughed with her friends, her plate piled high, her eyes sparkling. Watching her was all Ethan needed to know the evening was already worth it. Toward the end of the night, Michael pulled Ethan aside. "I want to offer you something," he said carefully. "Not charity, an opportunity. We have an opening at my company for a logistics coordinator. Steady hours, good pay, benefits." Ethan blinked, unsure what to say. He had no corporate experience, but Michael assured him the role came with training. "All I ask is that you think about it," Michael added. Driving home, Ethan's mind spun. It felt too good to be real, and part of him worried there'd be strings attached. But Lily's sleepy voice from the back seat, that was the best night ever. Dad pushed the doubts aside for now. He promised himself he'd at least meet with Michael's HR department before deciding. 2 days later, Ethan found himself in a bright, glass-walled office. The HR manager greeted him warmly, explaining the job responsibilities. It was more paperwork than he'd ever done, but the idea of regular hours and weekends off was appealing. They talked about benefits, health insurance, paid time off, and Ethan felt a weight he hadn't realized he'd been carrying start to lift. Still, he worried about being out of his depth. When the interview ended, the manager smiled. "We believe in training the right person, not just hiring the perfect. Resume. Michael spoke highly of your character, and that matters to us." Ethan left the building with a mixture of hope and disbelief, wondering if life was finally about to change. That weekend, Ethan told his boss at the diner about the new opportunity. His boss was surprisingly supportive, clapping him on the back. "You've worked hard here, Ethan. You deserve a break." On his last night, the regulars wished him well, and a few even joked about visiting his fancy new office. Ethan laughed, though part of him would miss the familiar hum of the place as he turned in his apron. He thought about how this all started with a single $20 bill he could barely afford to give. Lily celebrated with him at home, insisting on making popcorn and watching a movie together. Ethan realized the best part wasn't the job, was that his daughter could see firsthand what kindness can lead to. On his first day at Michael's company, Ethan wore his only decent dress shirt, freshly ironed. The office was a maze of cubicles, glass walls, and quiet efficiency. His trainer, a friendly woman named Carla, walked him through the basics. The learning curve was steep, but Ethan was determined. He asked questions, took notes, and stayed, late to review the day's work. Carla told him he was picking things up faster than most at lunch. Michael stopped by the break room, asking how things were going. Ethan admitted he was nervous but excited. Michael simply said, "Nervous means you care." That night, Ethan fell asleep with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. Weeks passed, and Ethan began to find his rhythm. His paycheck covered the bills with enough left over for small treats, ice cream after school, a new pair of shoes for Lily at work. He earned a reputation for being dependable. Co-workers noticed his humility and willingness to help, and some even invited him to join them for lunch. It felt good to be part of a team. One Friday afternoon, Michael invited Ethan to a leadership workshop the company was hosting. Ethan hesitated. He wasn't a leader, just a coordinator, but Michael insisted he had potential. It was the first time in years someone had suggested Ethan could be more than just what his current job title said. The workshop was led by a former Navy officer who spoke about teamwork, responsibility, and integrity. Ethan took in every word, realizing much of it applied not only to work, but to raising Lily. During a group exercise, Ethan's quiet confidence caught the instructor's attention. "You lead by listening," the man told him. "That's rare." By the end of the day, Ethan felt a spark of ambition. Maybe he could aim higher than he'd thought. Michael noticed the shift in his expression and knew the seeds he'd hoped to plant were starting to grow. Michael offered Ethan a chance to manage a small project organizing a warehouse inventory. Update. It wasn't glamorous, but it required coordination and problem-solving. Ethan threw himself into the task, working with different departments, finding ways to make the process smoother. When the project wrapped ahead of schedule, his manager praised him in front of the team. Lily celebrated by making him a Best Dad and Worker certificate out of construction paper. Ethan hung it on the fridge. The pride in her eyes meant more than any paycheck. Remembering the help he'd received, Ethan began volunteering at the community center on weekends. He didn't have much money to give, but he offered his time, helping with food drives and tutoring kids in basic math. One afternoon, a struggling mother thanked him for helping her son. Ethan simply smiled, knowing he was just returning what had been given to him. Michael heard about Ethan's volunteer work through a mutual acquaintance and felt a quiet satisfaction. Ethan wasn't just succeeding, he was inspiring others. The ripple effect had begun. Michael invited Ethan and Lily to his home for dinner. The house was elegant but warm, filled with family photos and books. Lily was shy at first, but quickly bonded with Michael's golden retriever. Over dinner, Michael spoke about his own mentors and the importance of community. He told Ethan he wanted to create a scholarship program for kids like Lily, and he wanted Ethan's input. Ethan was stunned but honored. "I'm not an expert," he said. Michael replied, "You're exactly the kind of person who should shape it." That night, Ethan realized Michael didn't just see him as an employee. He saw him as a partner. Ethan met with Michael and a small team to design the scholarship. They focused on families who, like his, were working hard but struggling to make ends meet. Ethan's insight made the program practical and compassionate. He knew firsthand the small details that could make or break an opportunity for a child. When the program launched, the first recipients were announced at a school assembly. Ethan stood in the back, watching as parents hugged their kids, grateful. Tears in their eyes. It felt like coming full circle from the man who gave his last $20 to the man helping others get a fresh start. Word of Ethan's role in the scholarship spread through the neighborhood. People began to stop him in the grocery store or wave from across the street. At first, the attention made him uncomfortable. But he realized it wasn't about him. It was about what the community was building together. Lily's friends started saying they wanted to be like her dad. That was the greatest compliment Ethan could imagine. Michael quietly watched from the sidelines, proud to have played a part in bringing Ethan's story to light. One evening, Ethan received a call from his estranged brother, Mark. They hadn't spoken in years after a bitter argument over money. Mark had heard about Ethan's recent success and wanted to reconnect. Ethan hesitated, but agreed to meet. Over coffee, they talked about their childhood, their parents, and the mistakes they'd both made. By the end of the night, they shook hands, the old resentment finally softening. It was another reminder that kindness had a way of mending more than just financial wounds. A few months later, the company faced a supply chain crisis. Ethan was asked to lead a task force to resolve it. The pressure was intense, with deadlines looming and tempers flaring. Ethan stayed calm, focusing on solutions rather than blame. His steady leadership impressed not just his team, but Michael as well. When the crisis was resolved, Michael told him, "This is why I knew you were the right person to invest in." Ethan realized he had become someone others relied on, a far cry from the man counting his last $20. Lily's school hosted a talent show, and she decided to sing. Ethan sat in the front row, heart pounding as she took the stage. Her voice was clear and confident, filling the auditorium. Afterward, she ran into his arms. "I wasn't scared, Dad, because you weren't." It struck Ethan how much his own transformation had shaped hers. She was growing up believing she could take risks and succeed. For Ethan, that was the real victory. Ethan proposed expanding the scholarship program to include mentoring. He volunteered to be one of the first mentors, meeting regularly with a teenage boy named Marcus, who dreamed of becoming an engineer. They met at the library, worked on math problems, and talked about life. Ethan saw himself in Marcus, the same uncertainty, the same hunger for opportunity. Michael supported the idea wholeheartedly, and soon more employees joined in. The program became not just financial help, but a network of support. The local newspaper ran a feature on Ethan's journey from struggling single father to community leader. The headline read, "Kindness comes full circle." Ethan felt uneasy about the attention, but agreed to an interview, hoping it would inspire others to act in small ways. The article went viral locally, and donations to the scholarship fund doubled. In a week, Michael sent Ethan a simple text, "Look what you started." A year after the first party, Michael hosted a formal gala to celebrate the scholarship's success. Ethan was asked to speak. Standing at the podium, he shared the story of the $20 donation, not to highlight his sacrifice, but to show how even the smallest act can grow into something far greater. The audience rose in applause, and Ethan spotted Lily in the crowd, clapping with all her might. He knew in that moment he had found his purpose. Michael announced that Ethan would be promoted to Community Outreach Director, a role that would allow him to oversee not just the scholarship, but all of the company's charitable projects. Ethan accepted with humility, grateful for the trust placed in him. The position meant more responsibility, but it also meant he could help shape the kind of world he wanted Lily to grow up in. For Ethan, it was proof that generosity and hard work could rewrite a life. On the anniversary of the first party, Ethan visited the school with Lily. They brought cupcakes for her class, just as other parents had done a year before. Watching the kids laugh and eat, Ethan remembered the fear he'd felt giving away his last $20 and the incredible journey that had followed. Lily squeezed his hand. "Dad, I'm proud of you." Ethan smiled, knowing the real reward wasn't the job, the recognition, or even the financial stability. It was the chance to live a life defined by kindness, and to pass that lesson on. Marcus, the teenager Ethan, had been mentoring, received an acceptance letter to a prestigious engineering program. Ethan was there when he opened the envelope, watching his eyes widen in disbelief. "You earned this," Ethan told him. Marcus shook his head. "I wouldn't even have applied if you hadn't believed in me." That night, Ethan shared the news with Lily over dinner. She grinned and said, "You're like a superhero, Dad." Ethan laughed, but deep down he felt a quiet pride. Helping Marcus was like watching a younger version of himself take flight. At a board meeting, Ethan proposed expanding the scholarship to include vocational training for students who weren't pursuing college. Opportunity comes in many forms, he explained. The idea sparked a lively discussion. Michael backed him fully, emphasizing that the goal was to remove barriers, not just hand out checks. The expansion was approved, and within weeks, applications poured in from aspiring welders, chefs, and mechanics. Ethan realized this wasn't just about education. It was about dignity and self-worth. One afternoon, Ethan received a call from his old boss at the diner. A regular customer who had read about Ethan's journey wanted to donate a large sum to the scholarship fund. Ethan met the donor, a retired teacher named Mrs. Thompson, who said, "You reminded me that small kindnesses can ripple outward. I want to keep that ripple going." Her donation funded an entire year of vocational grants. Ethan sent her a handwritten thank you note, remembering how good it felt to be acknowledged. A corporate partner offered to double the scholarships, funding on the condition that their logo be prominently displayed at every event. Michael and Ethan debated it privately. "It feels like it turns this into a marketing stunt," Ethan said. Michael agreed, and they declined the offer. The decision drew criticism from some board members, but Ethan stood firm. He knew the programs. Strength came from sincerity, not branding. That summer, Lily got a part-time job at the local library. She was nervous on her first day, but Ethan reminded her, "It's not about knowing everything right away. It's about showing up and caring." She came home beaming after helping a child find their first chapter book. Ethan realized she had absorbed his lessons on kindness without him having to lecture her. In her, he saw the living proof of what his journey had been about all along. At the next annual gala, Michael turned the spotlight on Ethan. "This man has not only changed lives, he's changed mine." Michael told the crowd. To Ethan's shock, Michael announced the creation of the Ethan Miller Award for Community Leadership, given annually to someone who demonstrates extraordinary generosity. The first recipient was a single mother who had started a neighborhood tutoring program. Ethan clapped for her with tears in his eyes, humbled by the full circle moment. A nonprofit organization in Europe invited Ethan to speak at an international conference on community development. He had never been overseas. With Michael's encouragement, he accepted. The trip was eye-opening, meeting people from different countries who shared the same belief in grassroots change. Ethan spoke about starting small, sharing the $20 story to a room of strangers who nodded in recognition. He came home with new ideas and renewed determination. One Saturday, Ethan stopped by the old diner for coffee. The place hadn't changed much, but the waitress recognized him immediately. "You're the reason our tip jar has been overflowing lately," she joked, explaining that customers often mentioned his story. Ethan left a generous tip and a note. "Never underestimate the impact of your kindness." It felt good to return to where everything had started. Ethan received a letter from a former classmate he barely remembered. She had read about him online and wrote to say that, as a kid, she once saw him share his lunch with another student who had nothing. "I never forgot that moment," she wrote. "It reminded me to be kind in my own life." Ethan was stunned. Even before the $20 donation, small acts had been part of who he was. It made him wonder how many unseen ripples each person left behind. On a quiet Sunday morning, Ethan sat on the porch with Lily, watching the sunrise. She was nearly a teenager now, full of questions about the world and her place in it. "What's the most important thing you've learned?" she asked. Ethan thought for a moment, then said, "That giving isn't about what you have, about what you choose to share." As they sat together, Ethan felt certain that no matter where life took them next, the lessons of kindness and resilience would always guide the way.